Welcome to the Imposter Syndrome Club. My name is Jessamy G. I'm joined by my beautiful co-host Alice Edie. And today we are also joined by our special guest, Dr. Marion Piper.
Hello.
Hello, Doctor.
The doctor is in. Oh, no.
We're off to a slightly sexual positive start. I love that. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So, Dr. Marion, the way this podcast starts is that we ask our guests to read their own bio.
Yep.
So would you please indulge us?
I would love to. I love talking about myself. Classic Leo. So here we go. If you're looking for practical creativity for big ideas, then Dr. Marion Piper is your go-to gal. As a creativity coach and copywriter, she supports creative entrepreneurs to become their most creative selves so they can communicate their world-changing ideas with confidence and passion. Marion believes everyone is creative. Yes, even you. And in a world where everyone sounds the same, choosing the right words is the best way to stand out. Having travelled the world and completed a swag of degrees, including a PhD, Marion is here to inspire you to stop imitating everyone else and start using your own voice for reals.
Oh, I love it.
Yay!
Thank you, Marion. And how does that... So you're a copywriter, so I'm assuming that you wrote your bio.
I certainly did.
And how does it feel reading it out?
I feel pretty proud. I'm like, yeah, that tracks. That's me. That's me. I live and breathe that. It has taken me, I think, a really long time to feel like I embody it. And I think because I guess this is one of the blessings of being a writer is that I get to write into what I'm going to step into rather than feeling like I have to be the thing first and then create everything around it.
I was just going to ask you exactly that, actually. So you use it almost as kind of, maybe it's the wrong language, but like almost like a visioning practice.
Yes.
You get to try on your future and see if you like the sound of it.
Absolutely. It's like the least risky way to figure out like who do you want to be. You just write it down and be like, how does that feel?
I love that.
Terrifying. Not doing that.
Or I imagine sometimes terrifying doing it.
Yeah. Oh, don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's really, really interesting to me. Is that something... I'm sure I've seen videos of you online doing journaling type practices. Is that something you do as a regular practice?
Yeah. So one quote that I have become a bit obsessed about, that I think about all the time, is this idea of whatever I write, I invite, and whatever I speak, I seek. So it's this idea around like when you write something down, it's you kind of announcing to the universe, the energies, whatever, that this is what you're going to do. So I'm really specific. Sorry. Frog in my throat. I try to be as specific and descriptive as I can in my journals for that reason, because it also helps me get clearer on what I want. And yeah, I've literally been journaling since I could pick up a pen. It's like they're like my most prized possessions. And I'm actually in the process at the moment of selling all my stuff so that I can become a full-blown digital nomad. But the one thing that I can never, ever get rid of are all my books. And so I packed them up. There's 8 plastic tubs, 8 52-litre plastic tubs, basically full of just all my ramblings. So
how many years worth is that?
Well, I'm going to do some terrible math now. I am 36. I've been writing since I was probably like 8. So that many years.
Wow.
28. I was like, should I even dare try and do that math right now?
We're mathletes, guys. It's fun. Amazing.
I'm an artist. I don't do math.
And oh my God, I have so many questions around the digital nomad journey. But
Yes.
before we get there, just the idea of, so journaling, do you have a specific process or practice in place? Is it quite fluid and intuitive, or is it structured? Like, how do you go about that?
Yeah, me like 10 years ago would have just been like, well, I don't know, I could just put pen to paper. But a big part of my PhD actually was a chapter around the different types of journaling. And so I really had to, if anyone's ever done a PhD or is in one or thinking about doing one, you'll know how crazy it is, because you have to literally break apart how you see the world and what you think and your position and where you come from. And so part of that was unpacking that whole process. And I kind of came to the realization that my journaling practice is really a dialogue. So it's me having a conversation with myself. And so what we need for good conversations is really powerful questions. And so that's kind of how I started to think about my journaling practice. I was like, okay, because like there's nothing more terrifying than sitting in front of a blank page being like, what do I say? What do I write? Like, what if I write the wrong thing? What if I crack open a nice juicy trauma wound and then I have to sit in that space? So what I've kind of done, and I did this last year in lockdown, was I created this deck of journal prompt cards called the Expression Deck, 52 questions designed around the concept of post-traumatic growth. And they're all questions pitched at the 5 different domains of life, which I talked about in my creative mornings talk that I did back in April. And so, it's really, for me, it's starting a conversation with yourself and finding the right questions to answer.
And then do you have, sorry to also get like very nitty gritty about it, but
please do.
I'm like, I want to nerd out about this, like to the level of stationery. But in terms of, do you set an amount of pages? Like there's kind of the Julia Cameron artist way, 3 pages every morning, or do you have a set finish line for that, or do you start when you start and finish when you feel like you're done?
No. I am really specific about it, because as we know, creativity thrives in constraints. So mine is, I have an A5 journal. It's always A5, and I do 2 pages. And I always put Monday, the 4th of July, I put that at the top of the page, and then I number each page. Even though I know I always do 2 pages a day, I'm always like 1, 2, just part of the ritual to kind of get me going. But I'm not, I don't subscribe to the Cameron Artist Way method, because I feel like that's it's a very manic way of writing, and I don't feel like first of all, if you write for 3 pages, your hand's going to cramp. So that, to me, I'm like, that doesn't seem sustainable. And that's what happens to a lot of people when they start writing, is that they'll, hit the ground running, and they'll, build out that practice, but then they'll stop because it just becomes physically too much, because writing is a very physical act, right?
And for you, sorry to cut in, but does it need to be physically writing by hand? Like, it's not something you do in Microsoft Word?
No. Because there's something really beautiful that happens when you put pen to paper. The actual physical act of handwriting slows your thoughts down, and it gives you a chance to catch up to yourself. And I love that pace, because if I'm typing, it's very staccato. It's like tick, 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 and you can go as fast as your hands can go. But with handwriting, because you actually have to articulate all the letters yourself, forces you to really think about the words and the shape of them and the sound and what's going to come next. You kind of have to think a little bit ahead of yourself to try and have it make sense. And I in my practice, I'm very fluid about those 2 pages, about the amount of time it takes. Sometimes it takes 10 minutes. Sometimes it might take 3 hours. And I kind of dip in and dip out depending on what's happening.
And is it the same time of day? Do you have your morning coffee and writing, or an evening reflection, or is it whenever you've got a gap?
It's usually in the mornings, not right away when I wake up. It's typically just before I start my work day. So it'll be sort of around 8 a.m., 8:30, 9 a.m. But the one thing that I do love to do, especially if life is super chaotic, is I'll do it at night, right before I go to bed, because it also helps me just unwind. And again, with that handwriting, you kind of unravel the thoughts, get them out on paper. And I find that I always have a much better sleep when I do it just before bed.
Oh, that's interesting.
I love the idea, the image of handwriting. Even as you say that the unraveling of thoughts, that line on the page is that thought kind of unraveling in front of your eyes. Love that.
And so you've got massive tubs of 28 years worth of journals. Do you read back over them?
Yes. And actually, part of my PhD research methodology was going back into my adolescent diaries and mining them for
Oh,
I
no.
know. Yeah. Oh yeah, I went there. And looking for evidence of growth was part of my methodology.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. That is incredibly brave.
Yeah.
Please tell me more. Tell me about that process. How did it feel? Was it awkward? Was it horrible? Was it lovely? How did it feel reading back through your teen diaries?
It was uncanny. It was really uncanny. It felt so familiar and so foreign at the same time. And I distinctly remember I came across this one section where I spoke about something that I'd completely forgotten about that was quite significant. And I was so shocked by how articulate I was. I was like, man, like,
Wow.
that is crystal clear. Like I don't write like that now, but I think there's just something like the innocence in it because I was just so unfiltered, and especially, and this was around 15, 16, especially at that time, like you're really like grappling with your identity and like, what does everything mean? And like, I've always been someone that's like a really, really deep thinker. And I used to see it as like, oh, like people don't think as deeply as me, so there must be something wrong with me. But it's really taken me till now, like till probably my early 30s, to be like, oh, wait, no, that's like a massive superpower. Because people don't, like the stuff that I think about, like, and I've started to articulate it a little bit more over the last, sort of 2 to 3 years, especially in lockdown, because of, we had all this time by ourselves. I started to really like lean into that more. And like the more that I've leaned into that, the more like deeper my connections have become, the better my writing has gotten, like the flow on effect from doubling down on the things that you think are your weaknesses, but actually they're just like a gateway to your most vulnerable self, I think. So actually sitting in that space and going, what if I just did this more? Like what would happen if I thought even deeper? Like if I go to that next level of this thing, like what's there? What's beyond that border?
Is this where the deck of question cards emerged from?
Yes, yeah. And also people kept asking me in a similar way that you just did, Alice, of like, I want to start journaling. I know it's really important and I've tried, but I can't get the practice going. Like, how do I do it? How do you do it? And that really kind of pushed me to go, okay, like, people need questions. We need the right questions. And it's the same. And actually people have the feedback I've been getting is that people have started to use them as conversation starters as well. So rather than just for them journaling, like my friend and her husband use them every now and then just when they're just to ask something different,
Oh,
which I thought was really cute. I was like,
the power of a good question. Do you randomly pull one out of the deck?
I certainly do, yeah. And there's some that, because there's 52 in the deck, there's some that I still haven't seen or answered yet. So I kind of like that as well too. And probably by the time I cycle through them again, I'll have forgotten what's in there. So it's like always a nice surprise.
You're going to turn it over and it just asks you, so how very dare you ask me that?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
How dare you, me?
We this is a tangent, but I was at a wedding recently and I suddenly remembered while we were at the table that I'd taken a photograph of I'd done a workshop. It was with teachers and they were working on building relationships of trust between teachers and students. And they'd given the teachers 10 questions that they can use to kind of facilitate that. So it was a similar principle, like a quality question and that how that can set up a way higher quality engagement. And I'd taken a photo of the slide, but I hadn't read any of them. I just snapped a shot. So we're sitting at this wedding and I suddenly remembered and I was like, oh my God, let's find the questions. And one of them was around basically an exercise where you and someone that you kind of know to whatever degree, but the idea was to say 3 things that you thought you had in common with this person. And I think the idea with like a teacher and a student is to obviously build empathy. But we were sitting at the table and we were like, well, what if we did that with existing friends and couples at the table? So we just started going around the table and getting different combinations of people to kind of randomly be like, 3 things I think I have in common with Jessamy, or 3 things I feel that Marion and I have in common. And it was incredible the way it lit up the table. Like people, because it's you're giving the gift of a compliment to someone else, but you're also recognizing that reflects something in yourself that you love. And it was just so powerful and gorgeous, and I highly recommend it.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. And Marion, how did you write the 52 questions? Are they in categories, or how did you go about that?
So they're kind of the whole deck is pitched at growth. So I use the 5 domains of post-traumatic growth, which are building personal strength, deeper relationships, greater appreciation of life, spiritual or existential change, and a recognition of new possibilities. So I basically had 52, 5. So there was like 10 questions for each of those buckets. And then I just kind of went on a bit of like an internet rabbit hole, just looking for questions that you might ask to, figure out all those different things. And then I just adapted. I think I had a short list of about like 85 or 90 questions, and then just kind of piffed out the ones that I thought were very like regular and everyday. And so, for example, like a lot of journal prompt cards are like, how did it make you feel? Like, or like what happened? And I'm like, yeah, anyone could ask that. So my kind of spin on that was like, why hasn't it happened yet? It's like one of the questions. List 10 positive traits about your personality is another one. And another one, which I quite like, which is always a bit of a slap in the face, was like, who told you weren't creative? Is another one that's in there.
Nice.
Yeah. So they're in equal measure. Some are designed to be a little bit more, like a loving backhand. It's like a gentle, loving backhand.
Yeah.
And then there's others that are a little bit more optimistic and about gratitude and like looking for different ways to do things. But it was a really good exercise for me too, because it allowed me to think about what do I value and the different ways that I can use language to kind of get to the heart of what really matters. And I'm words obsessed. And I used to, similar to what I was saying before, like I used to hide that and keep it really to myself. But yeah, as I've gotten older, I'm like, actually, no, like I want to, this doesn't sound terrible. I want to infect everybody with my love of language.
Well, there's the episode title.
Touch everything.
Touch everything.
Touch
Patient
everything.
zero.
Yeah, patient zero. Yeah.
And is this where the digital nomad, the seeds kind of were planted or germinated, or it was through this writing that you kind of were like, oh yeah, this is my next thing?
Yeah, it just kept coming up. It just kept coming up in my journals. Every like 3rd or 4th day was like, oh, like I can't wait to be out in the world. It would just always come out as that of like, oh, I can't wait to see the pyramids, or like I can't wait to, to be on my laptop and sitting in front of a beach in Thailand, And so that idea though has been something, I think it's been wired into me since I was a kid, because I had a pretty traumatic upbringing and we moved around a lot. So I think I'd moved to lived in like 30 different places by the time I was 18.
Oh my God.
Which I think about now, I'm like, oh yeah, it makes sense why I want to wander, because that's my safe place, is being in motion, is moving around. Whereas for other people, who maybe grew up with, living in the same house for their whole childhood, they would continue that. And especially 0 to 10 is such formative time. So I think I've always been quite naturally curious and just wanting, I don't believe anything, I need to see it in order to believe it. I need to experience it to know whether or not I like it or I want to do it. Because the times when I just sit back and kind of think about it too much, then I dip into overwhelm. That's where my imposter syndrome comes in, is when I'm not doing anything about it. It's when I'm stuck in stagnation and not out there experimenting and talking and being in the world. That's when I feel like an imposter, because I'm like, well, what, I can't do that. I can't do that. It's just because I've been thinking about it too much. And so when I catch myself thinking, and I have been thinking about the digital nomad thing way too much, that it just got to a point where I was like, oh my God, shut up, book the damn ticket. Just go. The worst that could happen, you get there, you run out of money, you come home. Like that's the equation, you know? So, and I'm lucky enough that I've got the privilege and the support system and, you know, a global network of friends that if I was ever stuck somewhere, I'm guaranteed there's someone that I could call. So yeah, it's something that I think it's an idea that's definitely evolved in my head. Like it went from being like, I want to go everywhere and do it all really fast to now like, okay, where I want to be in one place for 6 months and then I'm going to see what that feels like. And then maybe I'll go to another place and I'll be there for 3 months, which has they've kind of coined it as slow madding, which I kind of like that idea. But yeah, so I'm not, and it's weird because I'm not nervous. I'm not overly excited. There's just this weird, like kind of calm feeling around it, even though it is quite chaotic and quite emotional in preparation for it. But maybe it's just because it's the right thing for me right now, that there's no resistance, which I'm not used to. Normally there's some kickback where it's like, I feel like, ugh, but this time I'm just like, arms open, just like walking into the sunset, like, let's go.
Yeah. Bring it on.
Where is your first stop? Like, what does this look like?
Yeah, like literally, like, so there's 2 types of Australians right now. They're the ones in Europe or there's the ones in Bali. I'm going to be one of the ones in Bali.
Just side note, Jessamy was one of the ones in Bali and I was one of the ones in Europe until 4 days ago.
Yeah, so, you know, I'm hashtag on trend. I'm just going to be in Bali for 3 weeks just to sort of suss it out. And again, kind of coming back to that point of like, I need to be somewhere and feel it out. I can't think it out.
Yeah.
I need to feel it out to see if it's somewhere that I would want to spend more time in. Because I've only been there once and I was there for like 8 days in 2018 and we stayed at a resort and so I didn't really see much. So I'm looking forward to just kind of wandering around. And then a friend of mine said to me like, well, why don't you, instead of just like rushing overseas, like why don't you just like house sit and just, you know, because everyone's going to be traveling for the next, you know, forever now that we can. So I'm going to house sit in Melbourne, Perth and Sydney over the next couple of months just to kind of save a bit of cash, be grounded, be in homes as opposed to like hostels or hotels or Airbnbs. And then after that, I actually have no idea, which is, I think that's the part I'm most excited about because I also operate of this principle of like, I don't need to know the full story to get started. I just need to know the first few words. And that's like the next logical step. Like, what's the next logical step I need to take?
I love that. And I relate to that a lot as well. Like we were talking about recently, I plan big, but not long. Started sexual, getting a little more
and
so.
We're back. And we're back.
As in, like, I'm happy to be like, okay, I'm going to start this new path that's like big and scary and I don't know where it's going, but it's not necessarily because I have a particular goal in mind of wanting to be a certain thing or achieve a certain thing. But yeah, it's just about momentum. Like having something like a vague goal in mind just to keep your legs moving.
Yep. Yeah, I read something today or yesterday around I think it was Georgia O'Keeffe, the painter. She said that she doesn't arrange her life around happiness, but she arranges it around her interests because keeping busy is what leads to happiness for her. And I thought that was a really a nice way of kind of looking at it, which feels like similar to what you're saying in that, you know, you have you might not know the destination or the outcome, but it's about like filling your life with the right combination of people, activities, like projects, you know, and I know a lot of creatives that also operate like that they're very project driven. And then, you know, they find themselves in, you know, creative agencies or jobs where it's about like the toil and it's like never ending. Whereas we need those ebbs and flows in our lives so that we don't burn out. And I love the project based thinking around everything, not just work.
So and that's a great segue, because I was going to ask, when you were speaking about your mindset now about going into this nomad chapter and kind of not needing to know exactly where the goalposts are, but just you're moving in the right direction and you're trusting that choice and things will emerge from there. Does this tie into the way you work as a creative coach? And also, like, honestly, to start just at the beginning, like, what is a creative coach? Like, who goes to a creative coach? Is it freelancers? Is it people working within businesses? Do you work with individuals? Do you go in and kind of coach teams? Like what is that?
What is
What is
it?
that?
What are you?
It sounds
Who dis?
amazing. I
Who dis?
feel like I want one.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
what is one?
New job, who dis? Essentially, creativity coach. We're in the business of meaning making, and my whole goal is just to get people being creative every single day. And it's looking at the things that prevent people from doing that, whether it's like their mindset, their environment, their goals, their energy levels. So it's kind of like, life coaching, but this is the way that I've been describing it lately. Life coaching is often about questioning you, but creativity coaching questions everything around the work. So it's not about looking at you as like someone who, needs to change their patterns, or, there's, your trauma's in the way, even though it probably is. It's more about like, how can we get you to where you need to be so that you can make the best work that you're most proud of and the things that you need to express, right? Because creativity for me, and, everyone's got such a different definition, which I love because it's such a big topic. But for me, it's really around how can we just express ourselves in a way that allows the rest of the world to see us. Because I think if we can feel seen, we can just accomplish so much more. And so typically, the kinds of people that I work with, it's not really specific to like an industry or a job, but there's really two types of people. So the first type are the people whose business is creativity. So they're the ones that basically their value is creativity. So it's your commercial creatives, graphic designers, copywriters, even web developers, kind of visionary, anyone that's building anything, that also maybe they don't have anything left at the end of the day for themselves. So they're really missing that piece of the puzzle, and so they keep ending up in that cycle of burnout.
This is so relatable. This content. Jessamine and I just like nodding our heads silently with like crazy wild eyes.
Help me, doctor, help me.
Guilty. So like that's really like one type of person, and what they're really missing is their own voice. Is that because especially when you deal in creativity in a commercial capacity, chances are you're often working to a brief. And while that is a really beautiful thing to do for other people, over time it can erode your own voice, and you can kind of lose touch with like, oh, what do I even think anymore?
Yeah.
And you kind of end up in that, feel a bit like a ghost of yourself, just kind of haunting yourself around. Speaking of ghosts.
There is a noise coming from somewhere, and fucked if I know where it is. But, yeah.
It's just the ghost of my creativity. I'm sorry.
You don't know what to draw.
Oh my God, it's so good. I'm going to be haunted by that. And then the other type of person is the person who maybe doesn't have a creative job, but they were like super creative as a kid. And they, maybe all the way up until university, they were just, they painted, they sang, they did everything, and they loved it. But for whatever reason, the world, their parents, their family, their friends, they gave it up. And so now they've kind of come full circle, and they're in a position in their lives where they're really comfortable at home, but they know that something's missing, and they really want to rejig and reboot that practice. And sort of, get back in touch with their creative self. So it's less about obviously making money off the creativity, but it's more about introducing the practice back into their life, which, their life now might be like, they might have a partner, they might have kids, they might run a business, they might, be really big in their community. But again, so it's kind of the same problem, but just it manifests differently depending on where the priority creativity takes in your life, whether it's something that you do every day for other people or if it's something that you used to do for yourself. It's kind of like the same thing, but just different.
Interesting. I was having this conversation with someone the other day, like, what's the difference between, so we use the word like creative as in like to be a creative, which we assume to be someone who's working in a creative industry, but I don't know if there's any like formal definition around that, but there seems to be a very different way that people use being a creative or being creative. You know, and I think that like my feeling is one is like a job and one is an action. But I don't know. Do you have any feelings about the difference between the two?
Yeah, well, for me, like one of the things that I rail against and is my greatest frustration is how conflated creativity has become with artistry, you know, and they're two very, very different things. One, you know, artistry is a skill that can be honed over time with lots of practice, whereas creativity for me is like it's your birthright. We literally built this entire universe around us. We make ourselves every day. Everything that we do is a creative act, and I feel like, and my definition really is just connecting the dots in new and interesting ways.
Yeah.
And so when you get those two things get conflated together, it, you know, one of the biggest things that it triggers is imposter syndrome. Ironically enough, because people don't think they're worthy because they can't do the action. They can't do the action. So they're like, I must not be creative then if I'm not able to paint or draw like all these other people around me, you know? When really it's like, no, you just haven't practiced that skill. Maybe because you don't want to be an artist, but...
Well, and also as someone who has, you know, my entire adult career has been in illustration, and from the other side of that, I know there are plenty of projects that I've rolled out that have been completely uncreative. But, you know, I'm sitting at a desk where there's like colored paints and pencils and it all looks very like cool and artisty. But that doesn't mean that the actual thinking and the impulse behind the solution that I'm finding to a brief is creative at all. Like there are definitely times where I've just phoned it in and done the easy, like rolled out a different version of a thing I've already, you know. So I think maybe that's the kind of flip side of it, that once you've worked in an industry that has the creative aesthetic, you kind of also understand that doesn't necessarily mean creative. And this, in the same way, just because someone is wearing a suit or building an app doesn't mean that they're not being creative. Like you say, it's connecting the dots.
Yeah. And a big part of that, and this is what I see as a big problem that happens with the people who deal in creativity, right, is that you do that day in and day out, that you just build those neural pathways so deep because you have a process that works and that gets you money. So you actually have no incentive to grow or to change or to evolve. Your incentive, all that's required of you is to keep doing what you're doing, right? But the most creative things come about from the depth and breadth of your life experience. So I've been reading a lot about the relationship of creativity to neuroscience, so like the neuroscience of creativity, and they talk about it in terms of that we all in our brains have this field of possibility, which is kind of like a night sky with all these different stars and planets and galaxies, and some you can see, some you can't, depending on how close they are to you, aka is it a recent experience? Is it an older experience? And so the people who tend to be the most creative and come up with the most out-of-the-box ideas, they have a really bright night sky that they attend to and that they watch and that they view and that they study all the time, which is why I keep banging on about journaling. It's like if you keep studying your own experiences and reflecting on them in a really deliberate way, it allows that information to be readily at hand, so that when you are faced with these problems or you are required to be creative, it's there, it's kind of ready to go. Whereas if you don't do that and you just kind of go on autopilot, which is what happens, like we're talking about this, about the creatives that just do the same stuff every day, you just go on autopilot. You're really missing and doing yourself a huge disservice and your past experience and your past versions of you by not tapping into that field of possibility and connecting those dots and pulling something from, the far right sky and connecting and being like, oh, actually that looks kind of similar, or that looks like it might match this thing over here on the left,
I love that image. It makes me think of just imagining the night sky, and like there's this whole night sky, there's this infinite field that you can tell stories about. and then there's like 12 zodiac signs. And I'm like, but there are a million different ways you could connect those stars. Like, I don't want to be a bull or a scorpion or a lion. I want to be a badger or so there's so many other pictures that you can draw in that sky. But yeah, you need to be looking at those stars and like willing to redraw those lines.
Yeah, and you need to have the right tools to be able to see as far as possible, right? And so that's what I kind of work with people to build out. It's like, well, how can we get to that information? Because you have it all, you know, and you hear this, like, it's a bit cliche, but it's cliched for a reason. It's like we have the answers within us already. We just have to find them, just have to know where to look. And, you know, maybe something is behind something, but we have to look at that thing first to go, oh, okay, what is that? What's that related to? And kind of following those quite literal trains of thought back to sort of figure out what's happening. I think the ghost is back.
I wonder if we're going to
leave us alone. I think you will. Otherwise, it'll just be three crazy bitches talking about ghosts.
There is someone hosting a tap dancing class about us, clearly.
Or maybe they're just really agreeing. You know, they're like, yes, stamping their foot on the ground. Yes, say it again. But this is also why I lost my mind with all those new telescope photos that NASA released recently that gave us that much clearer view of what the galaxy looks like. I was like, oh, see, like this is what technology is for. Technology is there to help us find clarity so that we can figure out what the hell all this shit means, you know? And that's really what I have this kind of guiding mantra in my life, which is this question, naturally, what does it mean to lead a truly creative life? So if ever I'm lost, if ever I'm tired, I'm stuck, I'm feeling like crap, I come back to that question and it reminds me, oh, like that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to create. I'm here to make something. And, you know, in order to do that, I need to figure out what all this stuff means. So everything that I do is really a meaning making mission. So I deal in the business of meaning making. So, that's my train of thought there. Just kind of ended.
You know, I always feel like, and I think we've joked about this a few times, that like it always comes back to journaling and meditation as the answer to everything. And I feel like it's like, you know how like we all actually know the way to like be healthy is just to like exercise and eat right, but you're like, no, I want a magic bean that does it for me. And I really resent. I'm like, I don't want to. Give me my magic beans and don't make me write in a book every day.
Yeah. Well, you know, journaling is meditation on paper, so you know that's.
Also, I could do a 2-for-1. Is
yeah,
do
saying. 2-for-1. 2-for-1.
All right.
Yeah. So there's your magic bean.
I'm listening.
Sweetening the deal there for us.
Yeah, that's today's magic bean.
Yeah. Back on the journaling, since we're there, I wanted to ask you, backtracking slightly when you were talking about going through your teenage journals and you said you were looking for evidence of growth. Could you talk to us a little bit more about what that is? Like what's the criteria for evidence of growth and how you went about that?
Yeah. So post-traumatic growth is a concept as well. It's like the more positive cousin of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So if we imagine PTSD as the downward spiral, which is typified by repeated traumas. That was really scary. Told you, ghost. The PTSD spiral is, you know, it's repeated traumas, it's repetitive imagery, it's intrusive thoughts, so thoughts that just play on a loop. Whereas PTG, which is comes out of positive psychology, it's the upward spiral. So it's typified by deliberate rumination. So rather than avoiding our traumas and what's happened to us, you consciously focus on it and you write about it, and in order to get to some understanding or some new narrative of what it means. And so what I was really looking for were the moments that I was deliberately ruminating on something. So it might be, and it could be, and it was really like a whole bunch of different things. It was like whenever something bad happened, like, and a lot of my research was to do with the mother-daughter relationship. And so oftentimes what would happen is I'd go and see my mum, and then I would come home devastated because she never changed. Spoiler alert. And I would write about it. And so I have a lot of like pages and pages and pages of me coming to terms with that, and just over and over and over again. And I kind of watched myself grow through that to the point where I was like, it actually doesn't matter that she doesn't change, because I will love her regardless. And so it became a way for me to kind of parent myself through that journey when I knew I couldn't get that from her. And so what I uncovered was that growth is not this huge leap. Like it's not the transformation that they promise you. It is the slow incremental shifts in either our behavior or our language that happen over time as a result of the focus and attention that we give our most painful moments. Yeah.
And speaking of that attention, it's as much as you can reflect in your journal on that pain, there is also the side of it where I would imagine then it becomes almost like exponential progress, because you're also going to notice your growth in the journals as well. You're going to start picking up on that. And in both cases, you're kind of creating just enough distance from yourself to be able to, take that step back. There's, whether it's a few days or whenever, how, to that point, how often do you reread them? Like, what kind of gap between writing and rereading?
Yeah. It does depend. Like I can't yet look at my diaries from lockdown. I'm really not ready to open that can of worms just yet, because I lived alone and was single through the whole thing. So it was it was the Marion show 24/7, and that I definitely needed somewhere to channel that. And the journals really copped a beating, because I was like, it's probably not fair for me to do this to other people who are also suffering right now. So we're just gonna put this on paper. But yeah, like oftentimes, like if I just see the book, like if I see a book kind of lying there on the bookshelf, I'll just pull it down and just flip to a random page and just have a squiz. And I mean, it's not as cringe as I kind of thought it would be. And it's actually really interesting to see not just the growth, but also like, what was exciting me at the time, because it's equal measure, right? So it's, while I, especially when I was younger, I was like processing all this really intense trauma and emotion. But then on the other side of that was like, I was growing into this person, especially creatively, because I did like anything creative. I was just like, I'm in. Like all my teachers were like, you want to? I'm like, yeah. They didn't even have to ask. And so like you have those two things happening concurrently, and I think that there's this myth around when you go through something difficult that your whole life is difficult, but joy still exists and it comes out, in little pockets in different ways. And so when you write all of this down, you see that really clearly when you look back at it, because you'll be like, oh, like, I woke up feeling really anxious, and then and then I watched this movie and it cracked me up. And so you can kind of see what you're going through. As you say, with enough distance, especially when it's on paper, when it becomes externalized, it's so much easier to actually like have an opinion about it, and to kind of go, okay, you read it back and you're like, oh, the decision I need to make or the action I need to take now is that, based on having just read this, because it's not you thinking it. You're actually rereading it, and your brain will narrativize it and put it into a story, and then you got an opportunity, I think, to change it, rather than just let it run through you. Yeah.
It's interesting. I did quite a lot of work with, now I can't remember his name for the life of me, but it doesn't matter, around foresight. So he was a lecturer at Swinburne University. I think he was actually did his PhD in foresight. And the intro to all of his workshops that he would run. So he did these with with schools, with big corporates, with community clubs, anything where people were trying to plan in a world that, has always been uncertain and is only getting more and more uncertain as time goes on. So how do you try and have foresight in a world where anything could happen and everything can change? And as part of his intro, he would always talk about how difficult it is to see change, and how we can only really see it in hindsight and with something to compare it to. So if you imagine if you had those those pictures you used to get as kids where it'd be like spot the difference.
Yes.
If they're next to each other, much easier to spot the difference. But if you try looking at one for 30 seconds and then looking at the other for 30 seconds, it's much, much harder.
Of course. That is blowing my mind. I don't know why it's so simple, but yeah, of course.
So yeah, okay, I'm getting more and more sold on the journals. I'm getting there. Because I
I'll
guess
have
that's what that's
everyone
providing,
converted.
right?
Yeah, I'll have everyone converted by the end of this episode.
Do you have any other practices like that you think deliver an outweighed impact in terms of the time that they take that you recommend to your clients?
Yeah. Long walks.
Yeah, such a good one.
Long walks. Definitely one. Anything where you can immerse yourself completely, where there's no distraction. So, meditation is an obvious one. Yoga is another obvious one. Even travel. And actually, I have a friend who talks about how healing travel is for trauma, because it forces you get a break from who you are by getting into a different environment, and you're meeting people for the first time who don't know everything that you've been through, and that is such a gift. Lord. So for me, I know it's been such a balm over the years, getting to introduce myself to people just as I am at that moment. And that's part of the hardest thing, I think, when you do go through something difficult, especially as a creative person, when you try to talk to people about it who know you and know your past, it's color, everything's colored by that, and you don't really get an opportunity to stand beside yourself to see things differently. But yeah, I think, for me, anything that's going to get you in flow, and get you out of your head and into your body.
Yeah.
And there's so many different things that you can do. And I tend to not be too prescriptive other than journaling, because I don't tell people to do it, but I just talk about it enough that they just feel bad.
It's happening.
Yeah,
it's happening
it's
in real
working
time.
real well on me right now.
Yeah. But also, like with anything that everything in life is a trade-off. So anything that new that you want to introduce, you have to let something go. So I've got a bit of especially for habits, a one in, one out mentality, because then it allows me to just swap. And so I don't feel like I'm taking on too much. I feel like everything is still kind of even. So, for example, if I want to take a long walk during that day, I'm like, if I go for an hour walk, I'm not watching TV, or if I'm going to journal for 3 hours, I'm not going to go out drinking, so I try to race and replace things, as I go. But yeah, I don't tend to be too prescriptive about it, because you have to go back to what I was saying before about I need to be out in the world experiencing things to know whether or not they're right for me. I don't believe I'm alone in that, or that I'm anything special in doing that. So I just encourage people to try the things that pique their curiosity. So if you hear something, or if you see someone doing something, you're like, oh, and you get that little like flicker, and you're like, oh, like it brings you a little like delight. Follow that. That's the thing you should follow. Don't be like, oh, I have to journal because Marion said I have to journal. Just wait for the moment. Wait for the moment where you hear the words. Like, I'm very auditory in all of my kind of intuition. So I have to wait to hear things. And typically, even when I start to journal for the day, I'll sit there, I'll open my page, I'll set it up, and then I just kind of close my eyes for a minute, and then I'll just wait, and there'll be like a sentence, or there'll be like 3 or 4 words that'll come through, and I'll be like, that's it. I've got the thing, So, and I think particularly when you are someone who has to create for a living, there's that huge expectation that it's like, has to be done, like go, we've got deadlines, timelines. But the creative process is an energy. Creativity is an energy. And so what we have to do to tap into that is to get real quiet and real still, and I think that often feels or sounds counterintuitive to being creative, because the world asks so much of you, but we are but vessels. We are but vessels for the things that need to come through. And you have it all, like it's all in there. So, it's just finding the right channel to stuff it into.
This is so
back to the sexual
helpful.
stuff.
Stuff it in there.
Dr. Marion.
Yeah.
What, on the flip side of that, thinking about habits, are there any habits that stand out that crop up again and again in the destructive sense that you see people kind of repeatedly struggling with, or like any shared bad habits?
Social media.
Didn't even give a beat. No delay there.
No, yeah. I only say that because I'm guilty as charged. because our phone, like the way that the phone is designed, it's designed to keep you plugged in and addicted. And like I'd probably say like 9 out of 10 creative people I know have like a slight addictive personality. And we like to be acknowledged for our work. And when that thing is just going off, it just pulls your energy, pulls your time. It's designed to keep you in there, not out here. So I have, there's a guy that I follow in the US. His name's Father Bronx, who is an absolute genius. He has a great podcast called Make Art Not Content. And he has this thing called a phone fast. So he says, like you would do intermittent fasting with your body, do that with your phone. So have only 8 hours of phone time a day. And so at like 8 o'clock at night, phone goes on silent, goes on airplane mode, and it doesn't kick in again till midday. And just see what that does to your productivity. It is insane.
Yeah, God,
That
sounds
just
good.
made my stomach drop. Isn't that terrible? I was just like, oh no.
Because we're addicted. We're hooked. We're
Yeah.
like so hooked.
Oh, it sounds so good.
Yeah.
I'm deeply embarrassed by my like gut reaction to that. Like I almost felt nauseous, the idea of doing that from 8 p.m. till midday the next day.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
I just try it and see. And you know what the best part about it is, from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m., go nuts. Like you can do as much scrolling as you want. You can, post, answer phones, whatever. But like it's so exciting when it hits midday and you get to like re-enter that world, and then you're coming at it like from a place of like, oh, I get to do this now, rather than this is something that runs my life that I'm constantly having to maintain.
And also it feels like you then are arriving at your phone as a fully formed person who's like
Yes.
had a morning and has your own priorities and has done your own work, and you kind of know who you are.
Yeah.
And then you're a whole person who's then checking a phone, as opposed to, I feel often what happens is I wake up and I'm still nebulous. I'm still like this fluid creature without a shape, and I turn my phone over and immediately that information goes through my eyeballs and tells me who I am, tells me what my day is, tells me what matters to me, and it's like in there. Once the hooks are in, I'm like, I guess that is what I care about.
Yeah, because you can only there's like 2 modes. You can create or you can consume. You cannot do them at the same time. And if you choose one over the other, like that's it. Especially if you start your day consuming, it is so much harder to then switch to creation mode, because you are then full of everyone's thoughts, opinions,
This is
ideas, and it's like this is common sense, but we don't do it because that's not socially acceptable. What's socially acceptable now is to be available 24/7, to be, tapped in, to be like, oh, I can talk to you on 12 different platforms and you're available to me, especially as a creative. Like, how many times does a client like email you, text you, hit you up on Instagram? Like, it's such a bad behavior that the world is just allowed to happen. But when you make yourself unavailable to the world, I mean, you wake up at 7 a.m. It's essentially 5 hours. Like, it's not a lot of time. Not a huge amount of stuff happens in 5 hours on most days, And so when you tend to your own garden, and as you say, wake up and allow your body to kind of calibrate to the day, it just gives you, and I find it gives me the energy I need to then go and give what I need to give, especially creatively, for the rest of the day. And I don't, it's hard. Like, it's those 5 hours, especially the first couple of times you do it, are excruciating. But you could also think about it like, oh, I'm just on a long haul flight. My phone's not available to me on a long haul flight, and I love it. So is this just I'm just flying to Bali? I will be.
Yeah. All right. I'm making a commitment now publicly that I'm going to try this for 1 week.
all right, we'll both do
Yeah.
it for a week and then reconvene.
Oh my
Alright.
God, that'd be so great.
And
I'm so
I mean, and
keen.
hopefully more if it goes well, but I will absolutely
Yeah.
lock in, commit to 1 week of phone fasting, and let's compare notes.
Oh, this is thank you both so much. This is the absolute conversation I needed to have today. I'm
Me
feeling
too.
so, to use your word again, but like recalibrated to kind of tackle work. Like, I've been feeling a bit floaty, a bit spaced out, and kind of just, this is very, very grounding and tactical, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I want it to be, and this is the thing, like I want creativity to be something practical. Like it doesn't have to be about, you know, the big concepts or like the pretentious, like heady art wank, you know. It can be turning your phone off for like 12 hours, you know, and it's about the things that allow you to then become that person that you want to be without the distractions kind of pulling you away from yourself. Because that's it. The world is set up to derail you from your purpose. Like that's just the way things are. So we have to be stronger and we have to be more act with conviction and be like, no, like this is what's important to me and everybody else can wait. Y'all can wait. And it's 5 hours.
And nature hates a vacuum. Like your brain will step into that emptiness with a lot of crazy as well. I mean, my brain will run itself in a million circles, but like eventually something good emerges, but it's not going to fight its way through. It does need some space to arrive.
Yeah.
You know what I'm realizing now, which now seems kind of dumb, but I love getting up early. I'm an early bird. But what I was doing for a while was getting up at like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, which is early even for me. I usually get up about 5:30 to get work done, to get like the most creative work done, because there's something magic in those hours for me before, you know, there's expectations of replies or nothing's happening in the world of social media. So there's no sort of temptations there, and just to sort of get up and go. And I still think there's some value in that. But I just realized, which is the bit that I think is dumb, that perhaps I can just create that slightly later in the day by not having my fucking phone on. Maybe it doesn't have to be at 3:30 in the morning.
Well, it's always 3:30 somewhere.
Yeah.
Hey.
It's a different time zone.
Oh, I love that.
Like I'm in Ecuador now.
Like, oh, maybe I could have been doing that the whole time.
Yeah, there's that magic darkness. There is something though.
There is.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, I hear your point, but there is also something very magical about 4 in the morning.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I agree. I'm interested as well in the like availability expectation thing, because I have quite hard lines with that. So and this may be controversial, but I don't answer my phone if I'm not expecting a phone call.
Love it.
Phone does not get answered. Oh, sorry. If it's someone that I know, I won't be like, I was not expecting this call from Alice. Decline. But for numbers that I don't know, and there's a few like practical reasons for it, and like there's a lot of spam calls around these days and blah, blah, blah. I also really hate talking on the phone. Weirdly, I realised since we've been doing so much Zooming in the last few years that it is just the phone. I would prefer to have a video call with someone over a phone call, which seems wild, but it must be because I get a lot of my communication cues visually, I suppose, and being on the phone, I get nervous about phone calls still. Like I will not call to like order a pizza. Uber Eats was a game changer for me.
Yeah.
Maybe, but I've always been that way. But I think that's actually, it's been very, my fear of the phone has been quite helpful to me, in that if I've got to do a bunch of phone calls or whatever, I schedule them all in a block.
Yeah.
And I do them all that way rather than, and it sets expectations with clients and stuff that they just can't call whenever they feel like, because I won't answer. So they can send a text, we can set up a time to call, but I need that, I need to feel ready to have a phone call, because I'm a baby that's scared of the phone.
It makes sense. I do think that COVID made people better at respecting the end of a phone call. Like meeting culture has shifted to be quite a lot more mindful of like if you book someone from 12 to 12:30, usually these days people are pretty good at keeping to that, versus I feel like before it was just quite open-ended because people weren't sitting on Zoom for 8 hours a day kind of thing.
Yeah, we have to be like ruthless in our defense of our time. like ruthless, and set the tone. We have to be the ones that set the tone, especially, if you are working in creativity, because they're, people think it's magical and fluffy and woo, like like all that stuff. But it's also like a process, and it needs space and time to develop and to be honed and to be witnessed. And if we don't, because of how much people need, how needy people are, they will keep asking until you say no, And so I think I love that you have that relationship with your phone. It's perfect. I will talk on anything to anything. So my challenge is like, okay, maybe we just like give it a bit of a time buffer for the day, But and this is even when you do try the phone fast, like know that you'll probably be fine for like the first 4.5 hours, but it's that last little window of time where you can feel it, like you can kind of feel that like, oh, it's coming to an end, and the cravings kick in. Like this is what I mean. It's like a literal addiction. Like you feel like I'll pick up my phone to look at it and be like, oh my God, like without even thinking, because it's just such an ingrained behavior. So this stuff takes time, I think, to figure out what your relationship is to availability and technology. But then it also takes that like, just like really mundane practice of just like doing it over and over and over and over again until it becomes something that you don't think about.
Yeah.
So speaking of your relationship to technology and time, and given the fact that you're now going to be setting up a life of travel and movement and obviously working at the same time, you referred to slow matting, so getting extended periods of time in a place you can actually kind of still work. I mean, in a sense, it's not like travel just for travel. Like you're gonna get your day to day of what it would feel like to be working in that place. Like what does that look like for you? Like what is your work setup?
Yeah, so I have a good example for this, which I road tested back in March and April when I was in the US. I made the big mistake, and I heard people warn me about this. They're like, don't try and do your home schedule when you are being out in a digital nomad situation, because you will get really depressed really quickly and you will burn out really quickly. So because, you're in a place and you want to go explore, but then you have all this work that you need to do. And so what I decided when I was over there, because I spent like 3 weeks basically just doing the same thing. And I'm like, well, if I'm just doing the same thing here, why am I here? I'm out here, I'm out in the world to live a different lifestyle, to escape that, that like inherited 9-to-5 mentality. So, okay, what's another way that I can approach this? And so, I was sort of reading around some like neuroscience stuff. I've been geeking out on the brain lately, as you can probably tell. That's like, most people have the capacity for 5 hours of deep work every day. That's it. That's about all the focus we can do. And it's usually done in 90-minute blocks. It's about as long as we can focus on one thing. So I was like, okay, how about instead of being like, I'm at my desk from 10 till 5 or whatever, why don't I just make my goal 5 hours of deep work in 90-minute blocks anytime during the day, and then break it up with other things. And that was such a game changer. It just changed my relationship to time massively, and I still do it now. And so I'll try to, and then, to your point of time blocking or putting like the same activities together at the same, all the phone calls we do at one time, I would then try to block my time based on those 90-minute blocks. So if I have a client call, I will block that with their work for that 90-minute block and probably the next one after it. And then I buffer it with like 30 minutes to an hour between, or 2 hours between, depending on what the day is and where I am.
I love that. That really, really appeals to me.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Oh, you're teaching me so many things. I feel like I'm going to have a new life by next week.
A creativity coach?
What? You should do this for a living. Because like sometimes I sort of found like, especially with the time zone differences too, like sometimes I was like, oh, I can only meet with this person really early in the morning. So rather than just starting my workday really early and finishing really early, I was just like, I'll do a block here, I'll do a block there. In between, I'll go and explore this cafe, or like later on, I'm going to meet up with a friend. So I'll meet up for a bit. And I actually found that a byproduct of what I was doing is I was rewarding myself for doing the work. It took me ages to figure that out. I was like, why does this feel so good? I'm like, because I'm giving myself little treats.
Yeah.
like 10 treats a day. And I like that. This is my brain. She loves that. She's like, yes, I will do whatever you want me to do if then I can go to the pub.
Yeah.
And
we'll work for treats.
Exactly.
We'll work for
90
treats.
minutes is so manageable. Like, even just thinking about that, I'm like, even working on a job I don't want to do for a client that I don't like, I can do I can manage 90 minutes. That's possible.
And I go one step further and I break that into the 2 45-minute blocks, and I'll Pomodoro timer 40 minutes with a 5-minute break for each of those.
Oh my God, I'm loving this. I could like geek out on time management forever. It's my favorite way of procrastinating.
Ironically so.
Oh my goodness, amazing. Marion, I feel like I've gotten so many like incredibly useful, practical, awesome things that are, I don't know, maybe going to change my life.
It's just low-key.
No pressure. I'm going to ask you one more question to finish this out. It's sort of putting you on the spot, but I feel like you've likely got something locked and loaded. So let's see. Do you have a particular mantra, saying, or words that you come back to that you sort of keep in your back pocket?
For any, like, just hard times or just
life in general? There's the thing when you like look inside and you go, what is like the one sort of saying, mantra, whatever that defines Marion that you keep coming back to over and over again? What would that be?
Oh my God. You're asking a writer.
I know.
I'm like,
Or even if it's just at the moment, your current one while you're packing up, getting ready for the big trip.
Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah, when I feel that like nervousness or like the doubt come in, there's just like 3 words that pop into my head, and it's, why not me?
Yes.
Why not me?
I love that. Why not you?
Why not me? Opportunity pops up. Why not me?
Yeah.
Instead of like, oh, why me? Just put the not in there.
That's so
why
good.
not me?
Love it.
I knew it. I knew you'd have a great one. Dr. Marion Piper, thank you so much for being here. I love you. You're a brilliant human, and I can't wait to hear about all of your adventures. Beautiful Alice Edie, love you too. Thanks for spending the time.
Thank you both so much. And yeah, Marion, thank you for your generosity in being here and the richness of your answers. And just as we close, is there anywhere that you want to steer people to, websites, social media?
Social media? No, I'm kidding. My website is just marionpipercreative.com, and I loiter mostly on Instagram. Same handle, Marion Piper Creative. And my DMs are always open, even if you're just like, I have nobody to talk to right now. Like, just
slide on in there.
Slide on in there. And we're back. Full circle moment. Sexy. Always comes back to the sexy. But thank you so much, both of you. I admire both of you and the work that you do and the people that you are and all the amazing things you create. So thank you for holding the space and allowing me to just rant.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Imposter Syndrome Club. You can follow us on Instagram at ImposterPod or visit us online at impostersyndromeclub.com. Rate and review. That's what podcasters say.
Like and subscribe.
Are we real podcasters now?
I think we've got this.
Great.